John Lennon was one of the most influential musicians of the 20th century, a founding member of the Beatles, and a global voice for peace and social change. Born on October 9, 1940, in Liverpool, England, Lennon grew up in a working-class family during World War II. His parents separated when he was young, and he was raised primarily by his Aunt Mimi. Lennon met Paul McCartney in 1957 and formed the Beatles with George Harrison and later Ringo Starr. The band rose to international fame in the early 1960s, becoming the most successful musical group in history. Lennon's songwriting, often introspective and experimental, helped define the band's evolution from pop to more artistic work. After the Beatles disbanded in 1970, Lennon pursued a solo career and became an outspoken advocate for peace. He and his wife Yoko Ono staged bed-ins for peace and released songs like Give Peace a Chance and Imagine. By 1980, Lennon had taken a 5-year hiatus from music to focus on family life with Yoko and their son Sean. He returned to the studio in late 1980 to record the album Double Fantasy, which reflected his happiness and hope for the future. On December 8, 1980, Lennon and Ono left their apartment at the Dakota building in New York City to go to the record plant studio. They were working on final mixes for the album. That afternoon, a man named Mark David Chapman approached Lennon outside the Dakota and asked for an autograph. Lennon signed a copy of Double Fantasy for Chapman, who had been waiting for hours. Chapman remained near the building throughout the day. Later that evening, around 10:50 p.m., Lennon and Ono returned home from the studio. As they walked toward the Dakota's archway entrance, Chapman stepped forward from the shadows. He called out to Lennon, who turned around. Chapman fired 5 shots from a revolver at close range. Lennon staggered up the steps and into the building's vestibule. The doorman rushed to his aid and helped him inside. Yoko Ono followed, screaming for help. Police and emergency services arrived within minutes. Lennon was rushed to Roosevelt Hospital, but despite efforts to save him, he was pronounced dead on arrival at 11:15 p.m. The news spread quickly, shocking fans and the world. Mark David Chapman was a 25-year-old security guard from Hawaii who had become obsessed with John Lennon. He had been a fan of the Beatles as a teenager but later turned against Lennon after reading religious literature and interpreting Imagine as anti-religious. Chapman had traveled to New York earlier in 1980, intending to kill Lennon, but changed his mind and returned home. He came back to New York in December, determined to follow through. On December 8, Chapman waited outside the Dakota for hours. He had purchased a copy of The Catcher in the Rye earlier that day and later said he identified with the book's protagonist. After Lennon signed the album for him, Chapman stayed at his post near the entrance. When Lennon and Ono returned that evening, Chapman stepped forward and fired. After the shots, Chapman did not flee. He sat on the curb and began reading The Catcher in the Rye until police arrived. He was arrested without resistance and charged with second-degree murder. The case moved quickly through the courts. Chapman underwent psychiatric evaluations and was found competent to stand trial. In June 1981, he pleaded guilty to second-degree murder, stating he wanted to avoid a trial and accept responsibility. He was sentenced to 20 years to life in prison. Chapman has been denied parole multiple times, most recently in 2024 and 2025, with the parole board citing the seriousness of the crime and the impact on society. He remains incarcerated at Green Haven Correctional Facility in New York as of 2026. The assassination led to widespread grief and vigils around the world. Fans gathered outside the Dakota, leaving flowers and holding candlelight ceremonies. The song, Imagine, became an anthem of mourning and peace. Yoko Ono requested 10 minutes of silence worldwide on December 14, 1980, observed by millions. The case prompted renewed calls for gun control in the United States. It also raised questions about celebrity obsession, mental health, and the accessibility of firearms. The Dakota building installed stricter security measures, and the archway where the shooting occurred is now a place of quiet remembrance. The assassination of John Lennon sparked immediate questions about whether Mark David Chapman acted alone or was influenced by others. Chapman claimed he was driven by personal obsession and a desire for notoriety. He had no known accomplices, and the investigation found no evidence of a broader conspiracy. Some early speculation linked the act to anti-Beatles sentiment or religious extremism, but no credible connections were established. Chapman's fixation on The Catcher in the Rye and his identification with Holden Caulfield were central to his defense. He said the book inspired him and that he saw Lennon as a phony similar to characters in the novel. Psychiatric evaluations diagnosed him with narcissistic personality disorder and delusional beliefs. The guilty plea avoided a full trial, but his mental state has been debated ever since. The case highlighted issues of gun access and mental health in the U.S. Lennon's murder occurred at a time when gun violence was rising, and it fueled calls for stricter laws. Yoko Ono became an advocate for gun control and continued Lennon's peace work. The Dakota building, once a symbol of New York glamour, became a place of pilgrimage for fans. Strawberry Fields in Central Park was created as a memorial in 1985, with the word "Imagine" inscribed in mosaic. The site remains a gathering place for fans and peace vigils. In the decades since, Lennon's music and message of peace have endured. Imagine is still performed at global events, and his songs continue to inspire new generations. The assassination remains one of the most shocking celebrity crimes of the 20th century. It demonstrated the vulnerability of public figures and the impact of individual obsession. As of 2026, Chapman remains in prison, with parole hearings continuing to draw attention. The case is studied for insights into celebrity culture, mental illness, and the role of fame in motivating violence. It also serves as a reminder of the lasting power of art and the fragility of life. The assassination of John Lennon on December 8, 1980, ended the life of a cultural icon who had shaped music and advocated for peace. Lennon's death left a void in the music world and in the hearts of millions who admired his honesty and idealism. His legacy endures through his music, his words, and the causes he championed. Strawberry Fields in Central Park remains a place of quiet reflection and remembrance. Yoko Ono has continued to honor his memory through art, music, and philanthropy. The Dakota building stands as a landmark in New York City, with fans still leaving tributes at the entrance. To this day in 2026, the case prompts reflection on celebrity, obsession, and the impact of violence. What do you think? Was Mark David Chapman driven solely by personal delusion, or were there broader cultural factors at play? Share your thoughts in the comments. We read everyone. If true crime stories and high-profile cases like this keep you thinking, subscribe to our True Crime and turn on notifications for new deep dives every week. Because some lives, no matter how brief, leave a mark that lasts forever.